People, left and right. Up really late at night. Oh, rhyming. Hey, welcome to part 2 of daily number 528, where, in theory, we learn to be a better gamer. At the end of part 1, I talked quite a bit about this mid-game versus rushing to Broodlords, as so many people sort of autopilot do. But I want to come back into ThorZaiN as we start part 2 and talk about his perspective. ThorZaiN's going, "Ah!" He just lost a push. So he really doesn't have that much momentum. He has to flood tanks. Why? Simply, he saw roaches. And is getting some Thors. He's starting to be able to cut SCVs because he has so many of these orbital commands lurking about on every corner of every land. So he is going to now begin going for the starport transition. Sure, it makes sense. I don't want to be going pure mech all game long. I eventually want to tech up to something a little bit more awesome, namely the Raven. So when do I do that? I do it when I'm forced to defend anyways. So ThorZaiN's just doing a very smart series of combination plays. Rats, I can't attack, so I'm going to defend and expand. I'm going to defend and transition. I'm going to defend and harass. So of course, that cool little wall up at the start is looking to be a little bit... No! It's looking to hurt. Really simple technique. Just put another spine crawler there. Or just move the spore crawler there. Just do it. And then he can't get in. This tab's gonna look real funny by game end. I'm not gonna lie. So, we are now at this position, and let me just emphasize that, hey, if TargA had spent a little bit more time snatching up map control and focusing on mobility-based units, he would not be having this problem. And in fact, this expansion would be remarkably difficult to take with Mutalisk Roach. I'm allergic to hive tech, he said, funnily. Coming back into the game where Motor Mouth is in effect, as we are now getting close to a quarter of the way through this game. Upgrading here makes perfect sense. If we're going to be pushing with a slow-ass force of slow queens and slow broodlords, we may as well expand to a place that allows us to use our broodlords to defend. And then these counterattacks by TargA, let me just note, a fraction of TargA's army supply is in roaches. 35, that's 70 of this 130 supply army. So that's about half is being involved in a counterattack against a player who is literally focused only on defense right now. And yet still, this is giving us huge dividends. This is just kicking ass. It's also one of the reasons why players emphasize the Banshee production. And similarly, why many Zerg players emphasize the Burrow research. Look at these. There's just some free damage going down. Free damage! Free damage! And notice how easy it is to take an expansion here as well. Mass expanding versus mech. It's surprisingly easy to do. You just do it and realize how little he can do about it. Only way you shoot yourself in the foot is by teching to hive this fast. You do want hive eventually. Like, now that TargA's army's starting to get kind of juicy, starting to get into that juicy mass broodlordy. When I come to this army value tab, and this is getting close to 10k, then I'm like, oh yeah, I'm so glad I bought my hive. Oh, I'm never upgrading to the new edition. I like it just the way it is. Did you get the hive 4S? Nah, man. I just built the hive. You can expand at a ridiculously accelerated rate. But ThorZaiN is doing a smart move. While he's holding all this off, he has been performing his transition. Now, there's 2 steps to the transition. Starting the transition and following through with it. Starting it would be, of course, when can I build starports and not die? Well, we already looked at that point earlier. And the second part is, how do I follow through with it? Well, taking the expansion takes time to take an expansion, and of course it's good to take expansions. It helps us in the long run. So we may as well just build more command centers so that we can expand more. And while these are all building up, while we're gathering that momentum in that regard, we just keep powering up the Sky Terran. This is the nice mix that you want to go for. Ridiculous Viking count, you want to be cutting back on the Thors. Ideally 0 Thors is what we reach eventually. And all dat Ravens. So at this point, this attack once again makes sense to me. Why? Because we remaxed as ThorZaiN. Because we began our transition. Oh, one other thing that I think is really significant to note, back at this 20-minute mark, ThorZaiN went ahead and began to research ship weapons level 2 instead of this vehicle plating upgrade. Literally, he went weapons level 3 for TargA, and then started going air level 1. I think that's probably the... Jesus, I can only load replays in 5-minute increments. I guess that's what happens when your game is an hour long. Yeah, I want to just show this because most people, this is where I think most transitions go bad and what makes me admire ThorZaiN so much. Most people just go, bah, 3, do it. But ThorZaiN, see right here, this is the money moment. Goes for vehicle level 2 and ship level 1. He's already beginning this transition up. So that way, by the 20-minute mark, he's already midway through ship weapons level 2. And he's already in the midst of transitioning out of pure factory metal and into a little bit more of the sky metal mix. And then by this push at the 27 mark, excuse me, ThorZaiN has that mix. So yeah, he's completed his transition to this sky composition and can begin pushing. Again, we see yet another reason why I'm always a little bit down on this mix. Even though we have that death ball, look at this, almost 10k, 6k. A teensy-tiny little itty-bitty roach attack completely threatens the main base of ThorZaiN. It's a little bit of Thor pain. So ThorZaiN doing all the metal. Let's ask ourselves where to expand to. These are obvious choices for TargA. Here and here, it's at the opposite end of the map. More runaround things are going on. And of course, ThorZaiN expands close to him. This expansion is where ThorZaiN wants to snag next. Again, controlling this pod defends all these back 4 expansions, so let's just take what's close. Take what's close. ThorZaiN just continues to go for that air. And we're starting to get a little bit higher on the tech lab count as well. So that way we can do the follow-up transition to this, which is to replace ground units with battle cruisers. Yay! And replace SCVs with muels. Muel. Born is the king of the north. Oh, it doesn't rhyme, but it's kind of what we call a soul rhyme. Alright, I'm seriously looking at the chat to see if anyone liked that. Distractionation at its finest. So, excellent. As we go into the unit count station, we can see the sort of simple transition that we're seeing out of TargA. I almost called him TarZaiN. And ThorGA. He's just adding on more corruptors. He's halted on the Broodlords, which again I feel like are one of the most useless segments to this army. And he's just trying to flood in the corruptors. This is what's kind of odd about the way that late game Zerg vs. Mech has been going. Players are building the infestors and the corruptors because they're just like, oh dude, I gotta have the things to keep the Broodlords alive. He's made Vikings to kill these Broodlords, so I'm gonna make corruptors to kill Vikings, yada yada yada, blada blada blada. And it's just not that great. Because ThorZaiN, one of the things he's transitioning to is full energy. And I do say transition because it does take a lot of time, and a half-energy Raven is not nearly the same as a full-energy Raven for the purposes of a fight. Geez, 2-point defense drones. Shuts them corruptors down. This is a pretty cute little move, poaching with a single Raven. But yeah, just chillin', 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 chillin'. I would like to once again emphasize that a huge flood of Ling Mutalisk in the mid-game would have been putting a lot more pressure on. I strongly prefer Ultralisks in this late-game situation. Very, very strong. So as we see things kind of move on, the question is, how do we transition out of this? as either player, either positionally. I mean, unit-wise, there's going to be pretty heavy stagnation. We're going to see ThorZaiN incorporate more battle cruisers and more command centers. Nothing wrong with doing that. How many orbital commands are we working with right now? Okay, it looks like 11 orbital commands, so that's a healthy number. But ThorZaiN is going to do basic movement at this point. I'm actually going to speed this up because honestly, seriously, why not? He literally waltzes wherever he can defend these expansions from behind. Double planetary fortress at bases, very strong and extremely. I very much so advocate this as a Terran player. Don't just single planetary. That's more of a marining thing to do. Now, why do I say that? Because a command center is 400 and a planetary is 150, 150. So a planetary fortress is 550, 150. It's a heavy mineral investment. We're not going for minerals as mech. Battle cruiser, Raven, Viking, this is all gas. So this is an extremely efficient way to draw gas in the late game. And of course, the ever essential high-sec auto-tracking and structure armor. We'll be getting those for our planetary fortresses. So, you know, I hear a lot of people debate, should I attack newer expansions? Should I attack the main? You attack whatever is closest. And when I say closest, I'm referencing the most important thing for you to defend as well. So, here and here are the most important things for us to defend, and partially here as well. So this is our starting point. And what's closest to these three bases? Well, these top two. And then eventually this one, but probably this one as a follow-up. And ThorZaiN plays frickin' so dang patiently. Now the last step to transition is ThorZaiN. He's literally gotten all the money units up, is the nuke. Why? Because nukes allow us to get ground. Nothing's going to break this, but we're also going to have trouble advancing forward. So how do we go about doing that? This is a little bit painful that ThorZaiN literally had no spotters at the only expansion. Almost every map has a shared expansion location, and that should be watched so vigorously. Holy crap. Holy vigor. That just must be watched with, like, absolute 100% intensity. Because, I mean, TARS is going to get this, and there's the scan, and it's one of these, like, oh, crap, I really should have taken care of that. You can even just, while it's building, waltz over with the Ravens and just be like, 6 auto turrets, run away. Especially if your opponent's going Broodlords, can't really do anything else. I've been talking about this from TargA's point, or ThorZaiN's point of view a lot, but we can just pause and talk about TargA's from a little bit. Flooding drones to build lines of defensive structures. I mean, it's a way to spend our money, but we don't actually end up gaining any ground. We just waste money on a delay. And if he just has siege tanks, or worse, nukes, there's not really anything we can do about it. So, allow me to emphasize again, this is what makes mech feel hard, is getting to this phase and saying, well, gee, I'm not really sure I have any options as Zerg. And the answer is you should have opened up more options for yourself in the mid-game. I'm not saying TargA is totally boned or he screwed himself or LOL, TargA played completely wrong, because TargA's in a pretty reasonable position considering that he has a really juicy army. Yeah. Is this game sound too loud? Siege tanks are just increasingly loud in all these versions nowadays. So I'm cranking it so that way we can get crunk. What's hard to deal with this army is the battlecruiser Yamato cannon. Probably, I think that the best play to break out of this is to be like hatch, 3 rounds of larva injects, and an ultralisk cavern. And zerglings. Because weirdly, I will show you that in this very, very, very late game stage, zerglings are quite good against all of this. This is one of these paradoxic things that happens once you hit this max army, all the anti-zergling things. So ultra-ling transitions become super strong. Transition to hydralisks becomes super strong. If his battlecruiser count is too high, then the Hydralisks certainly struggle a bit, but I kind of want to swap my army out for something juicier. Because this is not really cutting it. I mean, he's building Vikings to kill my Broodlords, so I build Corruptors, which makes him build more Vikings, which makes me build more Corruptors, which makes him build more Vikings, and a couple Ravens. Nothing's really changing for us in TargA's shoes. I should speed this up. We're at the 42-minute mark. Getting close, but this is still an excellent exploration of how to begin chipping away as Terran. Look at this, a single-point defense drone. These battle cruisers are so important because the Yamato cannon is like, I'll have this unit for free, sir. By the way, that was another excellently illustrative example. Oh, bam! Oh, yes. And the point defense drone absorbing all the hits. So right now, the big thing for ThorZaiN is that he needs to not mess up. And he's in a really tragic position. A really heartbreaking, heart-wrenching, kind of like I'm watching The Notebook and I don't want to cry, but that's fine. Even men cry in chick flicks sometimes. Like one of those sorts of tragedies. Because this expansion is mining full and well. And we've never really had the opportunity to push it. We can't just hightail it and blitz over here, because he'll just walk down here and kill it, or even worse, he'll catch us mid-blitz and kill that. So pushing here is not necessarily a bad play. And honestly, having spoken to ThorZaiN just about these sorts of situations, he just says he actually is scared to move. I don't know how true that is now. That was very much so like a 9 months ago statement from him, but he says that generally the reason he plays so slow is that he's always envisioning unsieging and taking a step forward, and then a huge pack of units just kills him off. But, you know, rather than that being a weakness of ThorZaiN's play, he dovetails it into a strength. We're seeing excellent positioning, we're seeing that he's getting all these appropriate upgrades and all this jazz. Again, I would have liked to see an earlier Ghost Academy, just because the nuke is... I mean... yeah, this is this segment's pause and look at the camera and talk part. You heard me say at the start, or maybe you did, maybe you were still watching IPL. You heard me say at the start that most people have a good sense of the kind of script of the first 30 minutes. Everyone's seen at least a couple 30-minute games, and they get things like, okay, here's a reasonable mech script. Hellion Banshee into 3 base, general factory metal, and wrapping up with some Ravens. Generally, people see that third punch at the end, which would be the Ravens. Alternatively, let's do a Zerg one, right? We see against Protoss, we see triple base, Roachling, then we throw in some Infestors, and then we get Broodlords, and there's like that third thing at the end where it's like, and now I'm done, and I'm just going to keep doing that. But here we're starting to say, oh wow, he's starting to go into Ravens, so I get that, but look at this, now he's starting to incorporate battle cruisers, and oh wow, you got to see, again, the talk of the Ghosts, and some of you may have seen this game and see that Ghosts have an impact in here, but Ghosts would have been hugely beneficial here. Just being like, all right, nuclear missile, point defense drone, walk up, check, kill. Just what he does, fungal growth this, and then you get to do 2 Yamatos on his Infestors. Easy trade, looks excellent. We'll do it every time. There's one last transition that ThorZaiN catches very late, but is so critical to do at a stage like this. In StarCraft 2, geysers deplete. Also in StarCraft 2, gas tends to be the important resource in the late game. Therefore, if everything goes evenly, me and my opponent will both be broke on gas and loaded on minerals. So, we should just get the add-on and research Combat Shield. We should research STEM. We should begin these upgrades because it's going to hardly impact our current plans. Hardly at all. When you get to these huge max armies where everyone has 6 bases and that sort of thing, it's not excuse me, it's not a big deal to have one less Raven in the fight versus getting Stim and Combat Shield. Or maybe 2 less battle cruisers and get your Marine upgrades to 2-2. So important to do that, because every now and again you'll start trading and things won't end up panning out, and all of a sudden it's low econ, and then you just build 50 Marines and go kill him very easily. That's the sort of final weird transition. We also see this with Protoss players. Zealot Sentry becomes very strong when it's hyper late game, and everyone's quite low. Not super high Sentry counts, of course, but you know, the Zealots. Zerglings become very strong. We saw that in Scarlet versus Nerchio the other, I guess, 2 days ago. TargA and most Zergs will have already been completely set up for it. Most Zergs are aware of getting the Adrenal upgrades. I mean, drones are going to be 3-3. You can't upgrade in claws. They're just unupgradable. So that's my little rant. Don't forget to do that back transition. But really simple moves. Couple point defense drones, not a ton. Siege tanks slowly inching forward. Lots of scans going down. Not moving every battle cruiser forward, just 2. Nothing wrong with shooting down the closest corruptor. Nothing wrong with that. Everything wrong with that move right there. That move was terrible. That was the worst. Anytime we see an opportunity, we can go for it. And this actually shouldn't be an issue. This is one of the big reasons why we transition into having this many orbital commands, because you're seeing a lot of scan, a lot of scan, you know, there's just plenty of scan here. So you know what? I'm taking a break. When we come back, we're going to conclude this game where we get to see the joys of ridiculously long games. Ah.